Welcome everyone to the For the Love of Creation Fall Symposium. My name is Beth Lormer and I am the current convener of the For the Love of Creation working group. I also represent Kairos Canada on For the Love of Creation. I am overjoyed to see so many faces gathered here today and have been just blown away with the interest in this gathering. Even up until the last 20 minutes, people still registering to be with us in community today. So overjoyed and grateful for that. For the last 18 months, For the Love of Creation has been bringing together churches, faith communities, and people of faith for education, reflection, and advocacy for climate justice. This initiative was born out of decades of ecumenical and interfaith collaboration on environmental conservation, creation care, and climate activism. Today, we are being called to collaborate more deeply, more intensely, and engage more broadly than we ever have before. We have come together to join a global climate movement led by Indigenous peoples, global partners, and young people to accelerate changes for a more just, sustainable, and low carbon world. Today, we have gathered to take stock of what we have been able to accomplish so far as For the Love of Creation and to discern what we are being called to do next. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are meeting today on the traditional territories of the Indigenous people across Turtle Island. We thank them for allowing us to meet and learn together on their territories. To the original caretakers of this land on which we stand, I acknowledge the land of the Huron-Wendat, Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit Indigenous peoples where I am right now. To all that was here for thousands of years before us across Turtle Island. We honor the struggles and the lives of those who gave themselves for it. For those here today, we acknowledge the ancestors. Beneath our feet, we acknowledge the land. Our ears to the ground, we can hear them. The Cree, the Métis, the Dene, the Saulteaux, and Anishinaabe, the Dakota and Lakota nations, the Inuit, the Blackfoot, the Innu, and all nations that came before us and those yet to come. An infinity of footsteps of those who long called this land home, the unfolding of bundles, the undoing of colonization, and the opening of this land to allow treaty to come alive. We affirm our relationship to each other and to the land. We acknowledge and pay respects to the Indigenous nations and ancestors of this land. And I offer gratitude to my colleague, Connor Sarazin, who wrote that acknowledgement. It is now my pleasure to introduce Willard Metzger, our moderator for today's program. The Reverend Dr. Willard Metzger began as Executive Director of Citizens for Public Justice in 2019, following decades of pastoral and executive leadership. As a former denominational leader and an author and speaker, Willard has much experience seeking to mobilize faith communities to address climate change. Willard relishes every opportunity possible to be in the outdoors, so we are grateful for his willingness to stay indoors and online with us today to shepherd us through the next 6 hours. Thank you, Willard, and take it away.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to also extend my welcome to everyone gathered here from many diverse places. And thank you for giving a day of your time. And this is a day of worship. This is an expression of worship because advocacy and struggle, that's a very important expression of worship. And it's with that attitude that we are approaching this day. So I'm looking forward to spending it with you. Some housekeeping notes I'd like to begin with. Please keep yourself muted during the plenary sessions to respect our speakers and their contributions to the agenda. Chat has been enabled for this event, but it will be disabled for portions of the agenda where we would appreciate your focused attention on our speakers. To use the chat, click on the speech bubble at the bottom of your screen to show the chat window. It will pop up. And feel free to take a moment now to, as you have been, introduce yourself to all of us. We'd love to hear where you are joining us from, and many of you have already, so thank you. If you do require tech support, please let us know in the chat. Eve Eng from Sisters of St. Joseph is on hand today to offer tech support to anyone who is having issues with sound or video. Before we formally begin our program, I'd also like to share a code of conduct that we will be using for today's gathering. We are including a link to the code of conduct in the chat and have put it on a slide for you to see. For the love of creation is an invitation to work collaboratively, learn more about climate change from a faith perspective, and feel welcome and safe in this multi-faith community. So we are gathering in this virtual space with openness and prayerful intentions. We respect each person spending their time with us today as a unique expression of God's love. Should any comments be made that are inhospitable or disrespectful of other attendees or facilitators, individuals may be removed from the event. This includes any discussion that takes away from time with our speakers and today's topics. So thank you for your understanding and cooperation. We are living in difficult times, and we recognize that many of us are experiencing feelings of ecological grief and or anxiety with the big changes that we are witnessing. So as we go through today's proceedings, those feelings may surface for some of us. For the Love of Creation is committed to support people of faith in processing these feelings, and we hope to expand our support through more resources and events on ecological grief in the coming year. To support people gathered here today, we have compiled a list of resources on ecological grief for your reference, and we are including a link to that document in the chat. So as a way to introduce ourselves to each other, we're going to be prompting you shortly to answer a poll asking what your affiliation is and if this is your first For the Love of Creation event. So please take a moment to fill out that poll and submit it now. Okay, so I'm not seeing the results of the polls, but maybe I'll have someone report on that for me.
We've got 130 of 146 answers in. Should we call it, or a couple more trickling in? 133 of 146. We'll call it there. 91%, and the results are on your screen.
So, all right, so we have a lot of returning people. That's excellent. And 38%, this is your very first event, so welcome. Thank you for those that are coming back for another event, and welcome to all those who are here joining us for the first time. And a good, rich diversity of backgrounds, so that's very, very exciting. So we're looking forward to, I think, a very good day. As For the Love of Creation, we are committed to three things in the process here. First, stronger action through theological reflection, which is to encourage grounded and relevant conversations around how our faith speaks to the current climate crisis. Secondly, to local and congregational engagement, to increase dialogue and reduce polarization in the climate conversation in Canada in order to build consensus on the actions we need to take to build a sustainable future for all. And thirdly, to political advocacy, to urge governments to take meaningful action to address climate change that prioritizes rights, equity, and justice for all. So today we will explore work that has been done in each of these three streams. We'll begin with the local engagement group, which will share information about the reflection and discussion resources that have been developed over the last 18 months and lead us in some small group discussions about how we might take our climate action and climate leadership to the next level. Then we'll hear from a collective writing process called the Letter of the Faithful, which is a grassroots process of theological reflection on climate change. Next, we'll have a panel presentation on the For the Love of Creation's climate advocacy goals. We'll explore how they have evolved and identify some key considerations for the next advocacy cycle. And at the end of today's event, we'll hear from 4 different voices on their reflections from the day's proceedings. We will close with a commissioning of the 8-person virtual delegation to COP26, the annual UN climate conference, which begins tomorrow. Now, each of you have received a copy of the agenda in your reminder email that you received yesterday and this morning. And it includes a list of biographies of all of our speakers. We're sharing a link to that program again for you in the chat in case you've misplaced it. But I will be introducing our speakers throughout the day with brief details on each, but do encourage you to refer to the program for the fuller version of all their biographies. So to start with now, I would like to introduce the very Reverend Ken Gray, who will get us started with the local networking session. Recently retired from over 35 years of lay and ordained ministry throughout the Anglican Church of Canada, the very Reverend Ken Gray now devotes much of his time to environmental advocacy, teaching, and writing. So, Reverend Gray, over to you.
Thank you, Willard. Will someone confirm that I can be heard?
We can hear you.
Good.
Thank you. A pleasure to be with you all today, and what a great attendance. And what a privilege it's been for me to work with the local engagement group. I took a minute to ask you if I was able to be heard, and this was strategic and to my point. So many good and great things have been done already in the For the Love of Creation program, and yet they need to be communicated in a way that people can not only hear them, but can deeply engage in them. And this is the challenge for our local engagement group. As with any music concert, rock, folk, or jazz, it's the sound technician and the video technician which help communicate or connect the performer with the audience. We seek to connect the work of the For the Love of Creation initiative with local congregations. No and never more challenging than in these pandemic times. More broadly, we seek to increase dialogue and to reduce polarization in climate conversations throughout Canada, not only between church and secular society, not only across provinces with their own needs and concerns with regard to the ways in which we have done business, industry, and commerce over the years. We need to take and to build a sustainable future for all. We need to breathe life into that word, sustainability. And again, we seek to do that at the grassroots level in congregations, faith communities, and all those who are committed to the vitality and reality of the common good. We definitely want to strengthen, as we are able, the faith perspective and the commitment to moral conversations. Not only talking about what is happening, what needs to happen, but the reasons for the change in attitude. In our presentation in a moment's time, you'll hear some be introduced to some resources, and in particular to a way of conversation and storytelling called the Faithful Climate Conversations. And so with that, I will hand over now to Patricia, who will continue our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I'm a member of the Local Engagement Committee, and I represent small group that put together a resource called To Take a Sacred Pause. It's a resource that was created to provide for reflection and connection with creation, and it was developed during our first early days of the COVID lockdown. And you can see a picture here of the Taking a Sacred Pause resource that is available on the For Love of Creation website. Through the conversations in our committee, the need for this resource was sparked by a member of our committee who is a city-dwelling mom of Indigenous origin, and she wanted to bring her children closer to nature during the COVID closures. So this is an offering of how we can engage locally. There are two parts. The initial part is a reflection from Gistanamagut, and it's inviting us to consider both why and how we love creation. So you're invited to read this reflection first to beginning and to center yourself and prepare for the next portion of the resource. And that is to take a sacred pause. And I'm just going to share with you how the sacred pause actually works. So in terms of the sacred pause, we invite you, as I said, to read the resource, the reflection first, and then to begin. And it's meant to be done in nature. It could be during a hike, it could be in any season, or even if you are indoors, center yourself around a window, look out into nature, look out into creation. And through your senses first, focus on something that's around, use your senses as wide as you can, use your vision, use your smell, your taste if there's salty around you, if you're close to the ocean, and you let your senses absorb all of creation that's around you. And then once you've done that, appreciate. Focus on one single element and appreciate that element for what it brings to nature, its shapes, its colors, its textures. Appreciate what it's offering to you in the moment that you're in while you're taking your pause. Appreciate it for simply being itself, and acknowledge and give thanks for the gift of your creator creation, and speak about your gratitude for that out loud. Connect. So connect with the element that you've focused on. Is there a story? Is there an image that it brings to mind? What depends on the element? Think about how this one particular element of all of creation and how you can connect to it. Does it take whom depends on it? How does it give? What will become of it in a day, in a year, in 10 years, in 1,000 years? What will become of that one element that you focused on? Respect. Think of how you relate to this element. How do your actions or inactions impact the part of creation? Express.
30 seconds, Patricia.
Show your
30
appreciation
seconds.
and respect by making an offering. And finally, delight. Delight and deepen in that one element of creation that you've taken. And we want you to take this resource and use it to give you a center and a focus. And it can be used at any time or any point. And again, available on the For Love of Creation website. Thank you, Ken.
Handing over now to Anna. Self-care as creation care. Anna?
So standing in for Anna is Sabrina Di Matteo, hailing here from Montreal, Tiohtià:ke Kanien'kehá:ka territory, and I'm happy to be with you on behalf of the Canadian Religious Conference. I will be taking you through a resource workbook, which I have no credit for. This is actually pretty much all by Anna Bigland Pritchard, who is from BC, a young artist and voice teacher, educator, committed to acting for climate justice, and she is also involved with the Local Engagement Committee. So she has put this resource together, but is in the middle of an opera, so I'm standing in for this. I will just share my screen and get us started to take you through a little bit of an overview of this resource. So this workbook is the Self-Care as Creation Care, and it's a contemplative journal. And as you go through this journal, you'll find different things. On the website of For the Love of Creation, you can also use 3 prayerful meditation audios, which are about 5 to 7 minutes long, whether you're walking outdoors. If you want to download them onto your phone, you can take this outside. There is another meditation helping you to visualize roots, and there's a meditation that connects us to where we are on this land. So it is very focused on the body and on connecting us to creation. In the workbook, you'll also find things where you're called to draw on your whatever artistry talent you have. No one's looking at your actual talent. It's just for fun, and it's for the possibility of expressing yourself in a way that is less cerebral and more tuned into your creativity. So you'll find exercises like this where you're called to perhaps draw something and image what you are feeling. You also have a few pages that are inspired by the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address and give you some elements of meditation and prayer connecting us to our common home and to elements of that common home. And finally, you also have, I'm giving you here a few examples of some journal prompts where you are asked questions around, for example, memories you have of connecting with nature, or your favorite sacred text or poem. How do you feel about the climate crisis? What has nature taught you? And you're also invited to harvest some of that activity and contemplation into a haiku in this case. And to end this presentation, just this quick overview on the workbook, I'd like to actually take a minute with you and allow you to experience some of what the spirit of this workbook is. So let's just take a minute to take a deep breath and settle into our time together. Really just take the time to breathe. And I invite you to look outside your window if you are sitting by a window, or take a look at the picture on my screen, which is a beautiful park I'm fortunate to have right next to my home. Or picture your favorite place, especially in the fall. Take another deep breath, and I ask you, what is your favorite color in the fall? Fall is a majestic symphony of colors, vibrant reds, golden yellows, bright orange. It is a rainbow in the canopy, highlighting the abundance of harvest season as the earth gifts us with sustenance. And the paradox of fall season is that leaves are falling, creatures are preparing for hibernation, and therefore there is a measure of death and letting go in this season. But they are simultaneously a promise of renewed life in the spring season. Throughout our climate justice work, we learn to pare down, to strive for a simpler life, and recognize our interconnectedness with creation, creatures, and all of humanity. So I invite you to breathe deeply once again and take a look at these 3 questions, and maybe choose 1 or 2 that you would like to answer today.
You have 30
seconds.
30 seconds.
You have of connecting with nature. How do you feel about the climate crisis? What is your feeling on this day that we gather? And as COP26 starts tomorrow, what are your hopes and prayers about this call to act for our common home? I leave you with those questions, and I hope you can use this resource workbook and the audios to take you through the rest of the fall season and winter into our hope for renewal.
Thank you, Sabrina. To the very second. We'll see if Kyla can do so well. Kyla's going to set out for us all the faithful climate conversations. Kyla?
Yeah, so I'm want to chat with you today about the Faithful Climate Conversations. I'm also a member of For the Love of Creation's Local Engagement Committee and helped to create this resource. And so this is a resource that takes you from those personal reflection and action into group conversation. So it's a set of 3 conversation guides that provide the basic scaffolding that you need to have small group conversations about faith and climate change and the impacts that it has both in your community and around the world. So the first guide, Creation, Climate, and You, eases the group into this conversation with some basic science, focusing on your own feelings and experiences. The second conversation guide, From Concern to Action, focuses on moving from head knowledge and feelings into concrete collective and individual action. And this third guide, Build a Better Future, focuses on helping those engaged in climate action reflect on their work and how you can gather others into this work in meaningful ways. And all of those guides can be found on the For the Love of Creation website. In the first year, after we released the Faithful Climate Conversation Guides, we focused heavily on creation, climate, and you. But we've noticed, and we know that there's other research being done that suggests that more and more Canadians are aware of the challenges of climate change, but they're unaware of the solutions. They don't know how to move from that concern into action. And so naturally, in this second year, we want to focus more on this second conversation guide and helping people to come together to think as individuals and as a group, what can we do with this concern and this knowledge that we have? And so we want to encourage you to make use of this second guide, especially with your congregations in book clubs or Bible studies or small groups, or just with your neighbors who live near you, as a way to brainstorm some of those next steps that you can take. So this conversation guide begins with a basic recap of some of that climate science and the impacts of climate change, and then offers time for personal reflection and then group brainstorming so that together you can come up with the way forward. So you're not just focusing on this for yourself, and you're not just focusing on this as a theoretical conversation, but as something that together you can do something with. And I want to emphasize that these guides offer a basic set of information and discussion questions, but you're very welcome to adapt them to your own group based on your own interests or the things that are happening around you. These guides just offer a basic scaffolding for you to build upon. And we want to actually encourage you to make good use of these guides. And so right now we have a poll that we're going to launch to help gauge some interest in the Faithful Climate Conversations. And your answers to these questions are going to be anonymous, so we're not going to be able to know for sure that you said yes or no, but we're hoping that it prompts you to think and then to follow up. So there's going to be 3 questions on this poll. So the first is, I will plan to host a Faithful Climate Conversation. We just want to know that there are people who are interested and who want to do this. Second is that you would like to attend a training or a practice session. So this lets us know that there are folks who would like more support in this process. And then third, we're planning to host a facilitator session on in the evening on Wednesday, November the 10th. And so if you want to network with other potential facilitators, that would be great as well. And so again, these are just ways for us to gauge interest. So if you could fill out that poll. I'll give us 30 seconds or so to do that.
And you have 30 seconds left in your portion of the presentation.
Great. So I'll wait on Kathleen to throw up the results whenever she thinks we're good. Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so that I'm really excited that there are lots of folks who seem like they're willing to host these conversations, and some folks who feel like they can do that on their own already. So thank you so much. And yeah, please do look up those conversation guides. And right now in the chat, there's a link to register if you want to join that facilitators meeting. And that will also be part of a follow-up email. And I'll hand it back over to Ken.
And I'll hand it over to Shannon, who is our staff support person, who will set up the whole local engagement conversation this morning. Shannon.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shannon Neufeld, and I am staff with Kairos, but Ken is convening now, and I get to be staff support for the local engagement group. It's great to have such a working group that really does work together. So I wanted to actually offer you an example of local group work. And so we have another guest here today. I will invite in a moment Henriette Thompson, who was once staff of the Anglican Church, now retired, to tell us a little bit more about Faith Climate Justice Waterloo Region, a growing collective of faith communities advocating for climate action and a just recovery from the pandemic. But first, I want all of you to think about your own situation, your own community. The Waterloo Region Initiative began in late 2019 with various Christian congregations expressing concern about the lack of ambitious action by faith communities in response to the global climate crisis. They now also participate with a broader diversity of local faith communities to work together for climate justice. Are you concerned? Would you like to see more ambitious action by faith communities? I heard this week from Jessica Steele, a young climate activist, quoting Adrienne Marie Brown, "How we are at the small scale is how we are at the large scale." What can you do on your local level to create the world you want to live in and pass on? Collaborative and creative, Henriette is here to inspire you, to show you everyday people of faith can make a difference. Henriette, please.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin with a quote. The quote is, "But here's the thing, no matter what a church's distinctive niche may be, no matter how effectively a church may be living out the classic marks of a faithful and healthy community of faith, no matter how innovative and creative a postmodern gathering of Christians may seem, every church faces a daunting new reality. We can no longer depend on the continuity of God's creation." That's a quote from the book Climate Church, Climate World by Jim Antal. I suspect probably many of you know that book and may have used it. When the former Ontario Ombudsperson for the Environment, Diane Sachs, visited Kitchener-Waterloo on January 19th for an event called Stewards of Our Future, faith communities were jolted when she said that during her 5-year tenure as Ombudsperson for the Environment, she never received a single phone call, email, or visit from a member of a faith community. Wow. In an interview with Steve Paikin of The Agenda, Diane said that she affirms the role of faith communities in modeling sustainable conduct, energy conservation, renewable energy, but also as a place to have a conversation among people who already have a basis of trust. Subsequent to her visit, faith communities in this relatively prosperous university city began to step up. It wasn't that we'd been sitting on our hands altogether. Congregations and ecumenical and interfaith gatherings were focused on climate justice work, and many of us attended youth-led Fridays for Future climate rallies in Waterloo Public Square. But we were spurred into greater action by the reality that we hadn't adequately internalized the urgent message that we can no longer count on the continuity of God's creation beyond a certain level of commitment. By the end of 2019, the year in which Ontarians voted in populist Premier Doug Ford, who eliminated the Ombudsperson for the Environment Office, movement toward catalyzing climate action came from several corners. Environmental groups in Waterloo Region, the universities, faith communities, and a deepening relationship between churches on the Haldimand Tract and Haudenosaunee leaders on the Six Nations of the Grand River, as well as relationships with landback leaders in the urban areas. The nascent faith community effort began with several in-person gatherings in early 2020, and after COVID hit, we met by Zoom like everyone else. We actively sought the support of Christians Together Waterloo Region, a huge ministerial, and Interfaith Grand River, among others, to encourage people to join what we were now calling Faith Climate Justice Waterloo Region in a series of open dialogues. We created a 4-member coordinating committee whose role was to create space and some structure for discussion and action. We articulated the values and principles we hoped would gird the work of Faith Climate Justice WR. We formed 7 working groups and acknowledged the overlapping work of these. Meanwhile, art became an important medium to build visibility for climate justice and created a space for informal conversation just through its presence. And here I'd like to ask if Shannon, if you could put up the poster. Thank you. 2 local designers, Abi Duwan and Heather Lee, created a beautiful banner. It has become a local signature public visual for Earth Day that is a call to action. We have benefited by good media coverage too. This 4-foot by 10-foot banner now graces the exteriors of more than 12 places of worship in Kitchener-Waterloo, and the orders continue to come in. We are able to offer the banners at cost to participating faith communities. And whenever you like, the banner can come down again. So too, we have sought opportunities to join with others in Indigenous-led efforts that integrate Indigenous self-determination, healing, and earth care. A recent occasion was a fedge planting, and this is creating liminal, in the liminal space between woods and fields, a place of planting fruit bushes and grasses and other plants. And this was an initiative by Faith Food Forests. We planted on the edge of the woods where Crowshield Lodge is being built, and where Clarence Katchagi began with an opening ceremony and smudge in early October. Just moving forward quickly, on the policy front, Faith Climate Justice Waterloo Region submitted a statement to Region of Waterloo Council in June, expressing support for the Transform WR Climate Action Strategy, but which we didn't feel was ambitious enough in its targets. And so we supported a 50 by 30 motion for Council's consideration and decision. This collective statement was drafted by the Actions and Policy Advocacy Working Group and signed by many local congregations and faith communities, as well as by individuals. It was also accompanied by a delegation of members of Faith Climate Justice to Council over a period of 2 weeks in June, as the 8 municipal councils within Waterloo Region heard faith community and other delegations promote a more ambitious climate target. We were encouraged in the end to see all 8 municipal councils approve a 50% reduction in GHG emissions by 2030. Now we are engaged in a plan to work closely with those councils to implement progress toward those goals. As Jonathan Matthew Smucker, author of Hegemony How To, A Roadmap for Radicals, writes, knowledge of what is wrong with the social system and knowledge of how to change the system are 2 completely different categories of knowledge. These 2 types are, the first being a knowledge of grievances or what's wrong, and the second being knowledge of political strategy, which is how to make change by political means. Our ambitious work is to grow in our understanding both of what's wrong and how to create change by political means, but not only by political means, also how to create change spiritually within our own communities. As Faith Climate Justice Waterloo Region moves forward and awaits with somewhat bated breath the outcomes of the UN COP26 in Glasgow, we face forward with the messy and challenging work of transformation within our faith communities and alongside others in the movement for radical political and social and environmental change. May God help us to have the humility to know the hour in which we live and to trust in God's transforming work of hearts and minds for the sake of the whole inhabited earth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Henriette, for your inspiring work and your inspiring words. Now it's your opportunity, folks. We are going to move into some small group discussion. And there have been a number of leaders that have been gathering in the past months from all across Canada. So first of all, Beth, I'll ask you to pop those group process slides up. So folks, the majority of your groups will have a designated leader who has seen these instructions in advance, but we didn't know exactly who was going to show up, and there are not leaders in every group. So we will send these, and there may be 2 leaders in some groups. So we will send these instructions in the chat as well. I'll just send them to everyone so that you can hang on to them. Very important, establish a note taker and then email the notes to flc.pac@gmail.com. Introduce yourselves. In the chat is quickest. If you are more than about 5 people, that is something you're going to want to look at. Go through the questions, giving a little bit of pause at the beginning so that people can think about them, and sharing the time. There'll be a prompt when there's just 5 minutes left. We're going to take half an hour for these sessions, maybe even a couple minutes more if we can afford the time. And so when there are 5 minutes left, be sure that you get on to the final question. So next slide, let's see the questions. What would help you personally deepen your relationship in climate action? And what do you think your faith community needs to deepen its climate action? Or alternatively, what could your community get involved in that would make a lasting impact? So you're together in regions so you can brainstorm together. I hope you have a really good conversation and also have a little bit of patience as we work out all of the groups. We didn't know exactly who would be here. So when you've got a couple minutes left, consider the question of, would you as a group host a faithful climate conversation?